short one. I will film a special live stream in a few minutes, well, about an hour from this one, on the streets of lovely Lviv in Ukraine. Yes, I am back. Привit and welcome. If you are new to my content, my name is Connor Klein, and on this channel, I use my experience in this country, primarily in Ukraine, my knowledge of Ukrainian and Russian languages, my background in international relations, to provide some unique and more nuanced content on the happenings of the Russo-Ukrainian war. So the big story in the last few days has been Russia's very sudden unilateral declaration that they're going to have a ceasefire until the end of Easter. So I guess that's until, well, we'll see how long it lasts and if it's even lasting. There are reports that there's still fighting and rockets being fired, although where I am in Lviv, it is been quiet so far on Easter Sunday. We're now into the afternoon, so with a look that will continue. But it is a short respite from Russia's terrorist attacks on Ukrainian civilians. We had that horrific attack last Sunday in Sumy, which killed over 30 people, including, I think it was close to 10 children, plus we had in Kryvyi Rih, where they hit a playground, and killed, was it 13 children? And there was around a dozen children killed. And, you know, Russia never says they make a mistake, so they'll claim that there was some sort of military target, but the reality is that either they are unable to hit what they're actually trying to hit, or they just deliberately target civilians as part of the campaign. There is form on that, especially how Russia has conducted its bombing campaigns in Syria, for example, about trying to break the will of the people by targeting civilians. That as a strategy has not worked very well in warfare in general. If you think back to the Second World War, and in particular this Russo-Ukrainian war, I see little evidence that targeting civilians by Russia actually, or the outrages against the civilian population that have been conducted. I had two close calls myself, one where it was very clear, cluster munitions attack on the promenade in Odessa, near to, wasn't quite sunset, but it was in the early evening, and there were just people out walking their dogs, jogging, and I was one of the joggers, but fortunately for me, I went the other direction, and I did not run straight into a cluster munitions attack, but unfortunately about a dozen people were not so lucky. What this does in general is normally stiffens resistance to any sort of compromise with the aggressor state, which is Russia. Russia started this war in 2014 with their illegal invasion of Crimea and parts of Donbas region in eastern Ukraine. And that obviously escalated rather dramatically in 2022 with an extended invasion. And the evidence so far is, from what I can see here on the ground and speaking to Ukrainians in general, is that the attacks on civilians make it less likely that Ukraine will capitulate or agree to some sort of bad compromise with Russia. So it is largely futile, outrageous, illegal, disgusting, vile. You can choose your adjectives, but it is the way that Russia has, in large part, conducted this war. And it's a war of aggression. It's an illegal war. It's an imperialistic war to end Ukrainian independence. And today, so far, for a few hours, I've had a respite. I walked around in Lviv, a little bit in the center this morning. Going to do a live stream, as I said, in about 55 minutes on the streets, sitting down somewhere to give you a little bit more of the sense of what is going on. So we have this declaration of a ceasefire. Ukraine responded by saying that they would match it and actually extended the offer to have a third-day ceasefire. So I think that was probably a shrewd move by Volodymyr Zelensky. I would expect Russia not to accept anything longer. In fact, I would be surprised if there is actually any sort of real ceasefire that extends until tomorrow morning. And I'll be glad if I am pleasantly surprised on that small point. But tomorrow, presumably, they go back to trying to bomb Ukrainian civilians again. So that is where we're at. That is the big development. Otherwise, the U.S. is basically threatening to walk away from the whole process unless they see some developments that might have been part of the calculation of Vladimir Putin to offer this ceasefire just after that statement, to string the U.S. along a bit more, get more concessions, weaken the U.S.'s position, presumably weaken Ukraine's position as well, and then never agree to anything and continue the war, because Vladimir Putin doesn't see for once, rationally, I would say any reason to stop the war now if the US is going to roll over and basically has flipped from being pro-Ukrainian to definitely leaning pro-Russian with the current administration. They basically most of them make up stuff, at least Donald Trump does, about who started the war, blaming Ukraine. And now he's refusing even to sell Patriot battery systems to protect Ukraine's skies and blow up those missiles that kill the civilians in Sumy, for example. He won't even sell them, never mind give them, or donate them. So that indicates that basically, all in all, whilst the US has not betrayed Ukraine or betrayed its allied NATO members as yet, it is definitely politically favoring the Russian position over Ukraine and over Europe and over its allies. It is a bizarre change. It is unprecedented. And with Donald Trump being less and less popular in the US, it'll be interesting to see how sustainable it is. I mean, he's unpopular for many reasons. He introduced these tariffs and took them off. And obviously there's a lot going on with Doge. And just in general, his refusal to accept a Supreme Court decision of the US, indicating there may be a constitutional crisis at some point in the very near future in the US. So all these things probably put together mean that a strategy for Ukraine will be to try to maybe not grovel to the US or agree to ridiculous demands by Donald Trump, but at the same time drag things on for as long as possible to presumably get as much little future aid that had been approved by the Biden administration, plus the intelligence sharing in the short term, while they wait for European allies to provide the replacement for US aid in the medium to long term. That probably will take 1 to 2 years, realistically. I see what the replacement for an alternative for the Patriot battery system. France has tested something now, but they think 12 to 18 months before they would actually be able to provide Ukraine with the alternative. So that might work, but 18 months is a long time in this war. Russia will have significant issues later this year with its economy, presumably, unless the US suddenly lists all sanctions, tries to save the Russian economy. This is, the Overton window has moved so much towards Russia's favor from the US administration that we now have to consider that. It wasn't something I was considering pre-Donald Trump's election to the White House in, November last year. But barring that, Russia will have some sort of major economic crisis in the next 12 months, probably later in maybe a third or fourth quarter this year. And this will maybe provide an opportunity for some sort of real talks if Russia is actually in a lot of trouble. But they're certainly not going to they're not going to engage in a peace process that doesn't mean capitulation of Ukraine from their point of view before they are actually forced to. That isn't the way that Vladimir Putin sees things. And actually, that's pretty logical when he has a U.S. administration that sends Steve Witkoff, with no experience in the region, negotiating political deals. He's a real estate developer. He's also dealing with the Gaza-Israeli war at the same time. Just dealing with either of these conflicts as a skilled negotiator with a lot of experience would be difficult. Doing it without it just seems completely mad to me. It would overwhelm anyone, and he doesn't seem to have a basic grasp on the facts or understand who he's dealing with in Vladimir Putin. He seems enamored of him. So all of this leads to a resumption of Russian attacks, I would say, by tomorrow morning, and to the same extent as before, but we'll find out, obviously. And a continued push from the US side towards probably maybe even backing Russia to win, although that would be politically dangerous for Donald Trump if he is increasingly unpopular back home in the US, and also because many of the more conservative members of the Republican Party will not be very happy about US supporting Russia over Ukraine and Europe, and they will feel that they are possibly going to lose the midterms, many of them in the House of Representatives, if Donald Trump continues on this path. So there may be some significant pushback from there. The Democratic Party don't seem to be offering very formidable resistance to the political machinations of Donald Trump and the MAGA administration that is in power in the US at the moment. So that's probably the best case scenario from a pro-Ukrainian US position. So I'm going to leave it at that because, well, I will continue on the streets of Lviv in about 15 minutes. So I will see you there, and do pobачення and happy Easter.